Silent Hill 2, the sequel to the critically acclaimed horror game Silent Hill. It was released for the PlayStation 2 in 2001. It follows a completely new protagonist. Instead of following up in the story, it starts a completely new one in the same old haunted town of Silent Hill. If you ask many Silent Hill fans what their favorite game of the franchise is, they'll usually respond with Silent Hill 2. But is it really that good? Is it the best one in the series? Let's pop it in and find out.
Like the previous game, there's a CG introduction. It showcases many scenes from the game while it plays one of my favorite songs in video game history. This song is called Theme of Laura, and in my opinion, it's one of the most beautiful songs in video game history. I really think it fits the game extraordinarily well. It also has that familiar bit from the first Silent Hill theme incorporated in it. Silent Hill 2 follows the story of James Sunderland, a 29-year-old man who receives a letter from his dead wife, Mary, telling him to meet her in Silent Hill.
The name on the envelope said Mary.
Years ago, when Silent Hill was a peaceful resort, the two would vacation there. So before you're like, why would she want him to go to a spooky town? That's why. It used to not be a spooky town. James even makes it clear how ridiculous the idea of Mary sending him a letter is, and that he doesn't even quite know what he's doing there.
A dead person can't write a letter.
I guess in a position like that, people tend to be blinded by optimism. The controls are very similar to that of the previous game. You'll use the D-pad to move and steer, and shoulder buttons to strafe. It all feels much smoother now, and there's no longer a clunky, awkward pause when shifting from a run to a strafe, or vice versa. The movement flows together very nicely. In addition to the tank controls, you can opt out for a more traditional way of steering James. Point the stick in the direction you want him to go. This is good for newcomers to the series to get a faster hang of the controls. Veteran players are probably going to want to play with the traditional control setup though, as it makes running continuously with suddenly changing cameras and strafing out of harm's way a much easier task. It's really nice to see that they made a choice between control schemes. It adds a layer of accessibility without ruining the familiarity. Combat is identical to Silent Hill 1, weapon types and all. There's your pistol, shotgun, rifle, short weapon, long weapon, etc. Like moving, however, combat does feel much smoother and much easier to get a hang of. Graphics have also been improved a great deal, seeing as we move from the PlayStation 1 to the PlayStation 2. The CG cutscenes also look better, but I definitely wouldn't say that they've aged super well, especially considering that the back of the game case claims that they're true to life. The game's music is as good as ever, delivering many creepy atmospheric pieces much like the first game. However, the music communicates more so a tone of emptiness this time around rather than a tone of intense fear. That's not a bad thing though. This game is conveying a completely different mood than the first game, so the change in musical feel is a welcome idea. After leaving his car, James continues his way into Silent Hill on foot. On the way there, he passes through a graveyard where he meets a woman named Angela. The interaction between characters in this game is a lot more awkward than it was in Silent Hill 1. In the first game, it wasn't long before Harry and Sybil were all buddy-buddy. In Silent Hill 2, the first person James meets gives a very mixed first impression. She seems innocent, yet like she's hiding something. You'll probably notice that the voice acting isn't all that great.
No, it's okay. I didn't mean to scare you.
It's okay overall, but there are a lot of sour-sounding lines.
Lost?
Angela warns James that he probably shouldn't visit Silent Hill, but James continues anyway. The fog effects are much more impressive with the improved hardware, but I can't help but to feel that the visibility isn't as obscured as it was in the first game. But that's probably due to the increased draw distance. Once in Silent Hill, James will follow a bloody trail to a dead end where he'll find the radio and have his first encounter with a monster. The radio actually sounds like a radio this time, instead of whatever the hell it was supposed to be last time. You'll soon find yourself in the apartment buildings, which serves as the game's first level. Level design is pretty much identical to that of the first game. Find a series of keys in the shape of various items to solve an array of puzzles, though this time I find that the use of items is a little more creative. The game sports a combine option when using items. With this option, you can select multiple objects at once if you need them to solve a puzzle, instead of painstakingly bringing up the menu 3 separate times to select each item. Returning are the riddle puzzles, where you'll have to arrange the items accordingly to a nearby poem. There are many more puzzles in this game than there were in Silent Hill 1, which is pretty great considering that the last game left me wanting more. Interestingly enough, there's actually 2 separate difficulty settings for the puzzles and for the combat. This is a fantastic idea that should definitely be incorporated in more games. While exploring the apartment building, James will run into many of the other characters. This includes Eddie, a fat kid throwing up in a toilet, Laura, a bratty little girl, and once again, Angela, who seems to be contemplating suicide before James comes in and interrupts her.
I don't know what you're planning, but there's always another way.
Before leaving, she gives James a knife that she was going to use to end her life, so she won't be able to use it if she ever gets the idea again. You'll also run into a monster called Pyramid Head here, which appears to be raping the monsters you've previously encountered in the building. The first boss battle pits James against Pyramid Head. This battle is kind of really lame. You pretty much just shoot, run to the other side of the room, shoot, rinse, repeat until the siren goes off and he runs away. Upon leaving the apartments, James will run into Maria, a woman who looks nearly identical to his dead wife, Mary. She comes off as creepy and seductive, which is done for reasons that I will explain later.
Do I look like your girlfriend?
No, my late wife. I can't believe it. You could be her twin. Your face, your voice, just your hair and clothes are different.
My name is Maria.
Unlike Silent Hill 1 that had at least some characters who were perfectly sane like Harry, all of the characters in Silent Hill 2 seems to be experiencing problems of their own. Like they're all called to the town of Silent Hill for their own personal reason, much like how James was called there because of his wife.
It's all the same once you're dead!
You and Maria will make your way through Silent Hill to a bowling alley, where you'll once again meet up with Eddie and Laura. Upon entering the room, Laura will run away, causing James to suggest to Eddie that they chase after her. This is where you will hear the greatest line in Silent Hill history.
This town is full of monsters. How can you sit there and eat pizza?
I remember the very first time I heard James say that line, and I laughed really hard.
The line just seems so silly and out of place. It's actually even funnier in the redub they did for the HD collection.
How can you sit there and eat pizza?
James and Maria chase Laura to the hospital. This building serves as the second level. It's also the first level where you'll encounter the other world, which doesn't happen nearly as much in this game as it did in Silent Hill 1. During the hospital, you'll have to bring Maria with you, which is kind of like an escort mission since you'll have to protect her from the monsters. This is the debut of the series staple, Nurse, which appear to be very sexualized in this game. The nurses are designed this way because the monsters that James sees are a projection of his subconscious. In Silent Hill 1, the enemies in warped version of reality was a projection of Alessa's subconscious, which is why the monsters didn't appear to reflect any of Harry's personal problems or fears. Because of this, it seems as if each troubled character in Silent Hill 2 sees the world slightly differently, as they all have different problems and reasons for being called a Silent Hill. James sees sexualized monsters because they possibly represent his frustrated love life, as his wife has been dead for quite some time. This is also probably why Laura seems to run away without fearing anything. Since she's so young and innocent, she doesn't really have any repressed emotional problems, which could mean that she doesn't see any monsters and instead sees Silent Hill as the original peaceful resort it once was. This is why the story of Silent Hill 2 really shines. Instead of being some messy plot about the cult and summoning evil gods or something like that, it's about various people with deep emotional problems being called to the town to learn a lesson.
Killing a person ain't no big deal. Just put the gun to their head. Pow.
These suppressed emotions then become infestated in physical forms, and their very own reality of Silent Hill becomes warped and twisted in their own personal way.
I guess you could say that Silent Hill is very capable of creating someone's very own personal hell. But only in overcoming this hell will they ever get over their emotional problems and accept their life for what it is now.
This is where Pyramid Head comes into play. His phallic design along with his aggressive mannerisms represent James's emotions. As for Maria, I guess you could say Maria is to Mary as Pyramid Head is to James, if that makes any sense to you. Right after the hospital, there's a chunk of the game that really feels like a bunch of padding. It involves you having to run all the way back to the part of town you started at to get an item, running all the way back to the park, which is the area you met Maria at, and then all the way back to the next level.
They really could have done without this bit because it just feels like a big waste of time running all the way back. It takes forever and it's not very fun at all. What they should have done is made it so you just run straight to the level instead.
The next level is an underground prison, which is probably the scariest part of the game. Wait, hold on. Scary? Have I even talked about scary yet? Well, no. Well, probably because, as far as Silent Hill games go, it's really not that scary. It might be because of the lack of really dark areas or the better visibility. I'm not too sure, but I really don't find Silent Hill 2 all that scary. The prison area still manages to be pretty creepy though, but I definitely say this is the least scary of the first 4 games. My other complaint with the game is that it's too easy. While the first Silent Hill offered a lot of challenge with a tough combat, limited ammo, and health, this game doesn't do that quite as well. The combat is still tough, which is good, but the earlier enemies are way too easy to take out with melee weapons without getting hit. Another thing is this game throws items at you like mad. By the end of this game, I had a hell of a lot of unused ammo and health items. Just look at this spot here, there's 3 health drinks altogether. I find this game to be a little too generous with the items, especially since you can find a bunch if you explore the town enough. No offense to anybody, but I think that part of the reason everyone labels this game as their favorite in the series is probably because it's the easiest game in the original 4. Much like how a lot of people like Mega Man 2 best, but that's really because it's the easiest Mega Man. During the prison, you'll run into Eddie a number of times. It's here you realize that he really has a problem. He explains to you his story, but unlike James, he fails to learn his lesson and turns into a total psychopath trying to kill James.
From now on, if anyone makes fun of me, I'll kill him. I'll kill you, James.
Unfortunately, James ends up having to kill him. You'll also see Angela in the prison, who's in a room with a boss you'll have to fight. It appears, though, that Angela sees the boss completely differently than James does. While it's just another monster to James, it appears to be some sort of representation of Angela's father to her. It's also here where you'll discover what Angela's troubled past consists of.
Or you could just force me. Beat me up like... Now he's dead.
I absolutely applaud this game for exploring multiple backgrounds instead of just James's, each having a different result, like I just mentioned now, Eddie, who fails to learn his lesson and ends up dying.
You know what it does to you, James?
After the prison, you'll have to row a boat across the lake to the hotel, which is the final level. This boat part straight up sucks. The controls of it are really clunky, and it's a very boring segment. Once in the hotel, the goal then becomes to reach the room that James and Mary stayed in together, and only then will James uncover the truth. You'll run into Laura again here, and she explains that she was in the same hospital as Mary, and while there, the two became friends. However, the time frame she says the story took place contradicts the date that Mary died, causing James to wonder if she was ever really dead.
I always really like this little bit of story exposition. It gives you a subtle glimmer of hope, making you think to yourself, maybe this journey is really worth it. Maybe Mary is there waiting for us.
It's during the final moments of the game where James comes to terms with the truth and finally accepts it. It's here where you'll fight Pyramid Head again, but this time succeeding in killing it. After killing Pyramid Head, you'll head up onto the final fight. Up here, you'll find Mary staring out a window. James, knowing at this point that it's not really Mary and not what he came for, fights against her to finally free himself of his own emotions.
It's you. But I don't need you anymore.
The final boss fight's okay. It's not much better than the previous boss fights, the way they all play is pretty average. I'd personally say that I like the battles in the first Silent Hill game better, but instead of having bosses for the sake of having bosses, every boss in this game serves the story, whether it being symbolic or literal. After defeating the Mary monster, James comes face to face with a recreation of Mary dying in her hospital bed. He explains to her how he really felt, which in turn has a huge twist that I actually didn't see coming when I first played this game. For the sake of saving you the story, I'm not going to ruin it.
It may seem like I did spoil a good chunk of the story, like the bit where Eddie dies, but I did make sure that I left out all the bits between Mary, James, and Maria. Those are the bits that are most important. So if you do decide to play the game, there's still much to see that I didn't even mention.
Overall, I'd say the story is pretty damn good. It's a huge step up from the first games, and it's very clever with the way it represents itself, not just through dialogue and action, but through means of symbolism. I'm not gonna say it's like the holy grail of video game storytelling, but it's definitely pretty damn good. The game has 3 possible different endings on your first playthrough, each of which depict James dealing with his aftermath in a different way. Each of these 3 endings have a different song that'll play during the credits, all of which are various guitar pieces, much like the introduction song. Each song delivers a different mood that reflects the ending you got. They're all really nice. The songs are called Promise, Overdose Delusion, and Angels Thanatos. What determines the ending you get is kinda weird. It has something to do with how often you look at the knife and photo of Mary in your inventory, and something else to do with how much damage you let Maria take, and I think how quickly you heal yourself in battle. I'm not entirely sure. It's kind of confusing, and it makes aiming for certain endings a little more difficult than in the other titles. There's a few additional endings you can unlock on a second playthrough, but I'll let you guys discover those for yourself. One of these endings is only in the game's re-release, Silent Hill 2: Restless Dreams. This version of the game was ported to the Xbox, with the PlayStation version of the game sporting the Greatest Hits label. In Europe, this version is known as Silent Hill 2 Interferes on Xbox and Silent Hill 2 Director's Cut on PS2. This is the version of the game that was included in the HD collection, but I'd strongly recommend getting a PS2 copy over it, as the HD collection is really buggy and ruined a lot of the game's visuals, such as missing graphics and the lack of fog.
So in the end, is Silent Hill 2 a good game? Yeah, of course it is. I'd easily say it's a better game than the first one. It's not as scary or challenging, but its streamlined controls, additional puzzles and levels, and vastly better story definitely make it a superior game. I guess because of the lower amount of scares and the slightly lower difficulty, it's definitely the game in the franchise you're going to want to start with if you want to get into the series. It's much more beginner friendly than the first game. So overall, I would say it's definitely a better game, but it's not as a scary game. If only they made a sequel that was much scarier and offered much more challenge.
Hey guys, and thank you so much for watching this episode of Nitro Rad. If you could do me a huge favor and click that like button if you enjoyed the episode, I'd highly appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe if you want to see more Nitro Rad content in the future. Be sure to tune back in next week when I do another video on Silent Hill 3. However, if it is after that date and the video is out, you can click the video on the right to watch that right now. If you missed the episode I did on Silent Hill 1, you can click the video on the left and watch that one right now. I'd also like to ask you guys for a favor, and I've made a lot of episodes here now, and I've poured a lot of work and effort into them, and I still don't have that many subscribers, so if you could do me a huge favor and share my videos on social media and spread the word around about Nitro Rad, I would really, words cannot describe how much I would appreciate it if you could do that. So you don't have to if you don't want to, but I'm just throwing that out there. I would be very grateful if you could do that for me. But no matter what happens, I'm always gonna push forward and try to make better and better content in the future. So, as always, I hope to see you guys in the future, and take care.
Silent Hill 2, the sequel to the critically acclaimed horror game Silent 2. Silent 2, that's the name of the game.
The movement flows together. Myron Aslan. Wow.